legislature has just passed House Bill 229, which defines the sexes between men and women. Tyrone Bowman. This is Tyrone Bowman Live. According to the Texas Tribune, the Texas legislature has passed a bill that strictly defines man and woman based on reproductive organs. The bill has no civil or criminal penalties attached, but instead will take these new definitions and apply them across state records. When Governor Greg Abbott signs House Bill 29, Texas will become the 14th state to implement one of these so-called, quote, sex definition, end quote, laws in recent years. Supporters of the legislation say it's necessary to protect women's rights and spaces and the immutable differences between the sexes. Opponents say it's an attack on trans people, erasing them from state records as the gender they identify as, and forcing them to live as the sex they were assigned at birth. They criticize the bill as problematic for intersex people who are born with characteristics from both sexes. But mostly, there's widespread confusion about what will exactly change as a result of this law. The question of the hour is, how will House Bill, or HB 229, be enforced and applied, said Sarah Corning with the ACLU of Texas. What we do know is that it's incredibly disrespectful to so many Texans the legislature represents and completely disregards their identity. So what does the House Bill 229 say? The bill defines female and woman across the government code as an individual whose biological reproductive system is developed to produce ova. A male and male are individuals whose systems are developed to fertilize the ova of a female. After an amendment added in the House, the bill says intersex people are not considered a third sex, but must receive accommodations in accordance with state and federal law. All government entities are directed to collect data based on this binary. The bill contains a legislative intent section which doesn't change state statute but is included as a guidance on interpreting the bill. It says that men and women possess immutable biological differences, including that women can get pregnant, give birth, and breastfeed children, and men are on average bigger, stronger, and faster than females. Women are more physically vulnerable to violence and have historically suffered discrimination, warranting the creation of single-sex spaces like locker rooms, bathrooms, prisons, and shelters. The Texas House bill also says that, quote, in the context of biological sex, separate is not inherently unequal, end quote. Quote, with this bill, women and girls will know that Texas has their back and will not allow hard-fought rights to be eroded by activists who seek to erase them, said bill author Representative Ellen Troxclair, a Republican from Lakeway, in a statement. There are pages and pages of references to man and woman in Texas code, which now refer to a specific, clear definition. So where did this legislation come from? Since 2017, Texas lawmakers have been attempting to legislate strict applications of sex in specific zones, like school sports and bathrooms. Some of these proposals have gotten widespread support from the Republican-dominated chambers, while others have stalled out amid partisan fighting. In the last 2 years, however, state legislatures across the country have begun considering these sex definition laws, which have a more sweeping application across state statute. At least 13 states have passed legislation like this, many including Texas, based on a model language from a group called Independent Women's Voice. The National Political Advocacy Group has support from conservative activists like Riley Gaines, who lost out on a fifth-place swimming trophy to a trans athlete and said she was exposed to male genitalia in a woman's locker room. The push to strictly divide everyone into two sexes, male and female, based on biological differences, got a boost from President Donald Trump, who issued an executive order in January, Abbott suit directing all state agencies to ensure that agency rules, internal policies, employment practices, and other actions comply with the law and the biological reality that there are only two sexes, male and female. Texas voters are largely on board with this type of legislation. 7 in 10 voters and 94% of Republicans believe that sex listed on a birth certificate should be the only way to define gender. And why are trans people worried about this bill? More than 120,000 Texans identifies as trans, meaning the gender they identify as differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. Many of them have physically transitioned. Some have obtained court orders to challenge their birth certificate or driver's licenses. Abbott's executive order, which was followed by an opinion from Attorney General Ken Paxton, directed state agencies to no longer recognize these court orders. Lawyers representing trans people anticipate that the state will not go back and reissue documents, but rather require they be changed when they needed to be renewed. They will inevitably lead to mismatched documents. Shelley Skeen, a lawyer with Lambda Legal, said earlier this month, someone who presents as a man but has a driver's license that says they are female will have to out themselves every time identification is required. Plus, they may have other documents like a passport, school records, or medical documents that align with their gender identity, worsening the confusion, legal experts say. Heather Clark, an Austin woman whose wife is transgender, told a Senate committee that it would be untenable for her to carry documents that say she was a man. Quote, anytime that she is required to show her driver's license, she could be compelled to explain why her appearance doesn't align with her documentation. Clark said, adding that could happen anytime she flew, took money from the bank, applied for a new job, or voted. That creates ample daily opportunities for discrimination, end quote. Trans people and their advocates are preparing for the changes to driver's licenses, birth certificates, and other identity documents. But they're also trying to prepare for the unknown, all the other ripple effects this bill will have across their lives. Lauren Lane Steele, a law professor at the University of South Carolina, who studies gender and sex demonstration laws, said that the application of these sex definition laws tend to be a big fat question mark, quote, close quote. To fully understand the implications would require combing through state statute and applying this definition every time the words male and female are used. The language of the bill indicates it was motivated by keeping trans people out of bathrooms that align with their gender identity, but it doesn't attach criminal or civil penalties for using an opposite sex bathroom, for example. Quote, we'll have to see if the legislators really looked at the code to understand what unpredictable, unexpected implications this will have, she said. You could foresee these there being changes that are unanimously considered bad, no matter your political ideology, but they just weren't prepared for it. So the question is, what is the concern for intersex people? One possibility, unintended consequence, is for the approximately 1.7% people who are intersex or born with chromosomal and physical differences to their reproductive organs. Democrats have argued they've raised examples of people with various conditions that would prevent them from falling into this definition based on reproductive organs. Quote, we can't forget that a population exists, and you can't necessarily force them to choose one or the other, Dallas Representative Jesse Gonzalez said on the House floor. Troxclair and others have argued that intersex people have long had a singular sex indicated on their birth certificates and driver's licenses, and this would not change that. The bill that passed the Senate indicates that they are not to be considered a third or separate sex. Democrats also raise questions about women who can't conceive and are postmenopausal or are born without a reproductive system designed to produce ova. Troxclair said the bill should be interpreted to mean people who have systems that, if normally developed, would fit into these two categories, whether or not they are fully developed, whether or not they are capable of functioning. Quote, we should not be boiling down the human's existence into one's ability to reproduce because this is harmful, it is dangerous, and it is really freaking insulting, close quote, Gonzalez said. When Kansas, Tennessee, and Montana led the nation in passing these sex definition laws in 2023, They face potential backlash from the federal government. Fiscal analysts in Montana estimated it would risk $7 billion in federal anti discrimination funds, and Tennessee worried about $2 billion in federal education and health funds. Texas is passing this law in a very different political climate, with a very different administration holding the purse strings. In April, the Trump administration briefly froze Maine's access to federal child nutrition funds because the state refused to bar trans athletes from youth sports. The federal government is definitely pushing a worldview similar to these state laws, said Paisley Cora, a professor of political science at City University of New York, and that's concerning for people across the country, not just the states that have adopted these laws, quote, close quote. Montana's sex definition law, which listed out more than 40 places it would be applied across state statute, was struck down by a state judge in February who said it was facially unconstitutional because it violates privacy protections and equal protection rights for trans people. Kansas's law is facing legal challenges from the ACLU, which say the law is unconstitutionally vague and should be interpreted in such a way that protects trans people. Lane Steele said there's a number of potential constitutional arguments against these laws, from privacy to free speech. Corning said the ACLU of Texas is closely watching to see how far Texas goes to implement this law. It's not clear to them whether it will narrowly apply to statistics and documents, as the language of the law says, or be used to pursue broader policy changes based on the legislative intent. Quote, if it starts being used that way, they'll definitely hear from us, end quote, she said. So for mental health support for LGBTQ youth, call the Travis Project 24/7 toll-free support line at 866-488-7386. For trans peer support, call the Trans Life at 877-565-8860. You can also reach a trans crisis counselor through the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988. Tyrone Bowman, never surrender, never quit.